Oh, he's the Shove It Man!
Shove It Squad were doing something a bit different to normal. It's a positive video. You know, wrestling's not always about who can have the most 5-star matches. There's a portion of the wrestling audience who's been left out and isolated from having a viable wrestling show. This portion of the wrestling audience enjoyed storylines and entertainment along with matches. We've been stranded and left forever to watch older and older wrestling shows until we eventually run out. And of course, I love the Attitude Era as much as the next guy. But I'd like to throw forward a different period in wrestling. The TNA heyday. This was after the Asylum days and after the Shove Sportsnet days. This was the early days of the TNA Spike TV relationship, 2006 to 2009. But I'm specifically talking about 2007. This is my favourite period of wrestling outside of the Attitude Era. I was old enough to clearly remember the moments, I was excited by everything they were doing, and it genuinely seemed that this would be a viable alternative to the WWE. They had all the momentum in the world at this time. Before we get into the video, make sure you join us as we fly to Graceland and hit 100k subscribers, and also follow me on social media. You can threaten to hit me with a brick. And if you like what you see in today's video, you can check out Impact Plus. They aren't paying me to say that, I genuinely recommend it. There's always going to be someone in the comments who points this next bit out. Yes, dumb stuff happened in 2007. There was an electrified steel cage match and some terrible wrestling gimmicks. But I will say this, at least they were trying. If you don't try, you can't fail. So maybe wrestling promotions are just pussies nowadays. Long intro out the way, here are the 10 reasons that 2007 TNA is the greatest. Number 10, the Rise of Kaz. I've always enjoyed Kaz's work. For me, he's an excellent blend of athleticism with mic skills, without taking his high flying to ridiculous levels. He just looked smooth in everything he did and didn't attempt anything too silly. Kaz had a brief shot at the big time in 2005 WWE before coming back to TNA. He had a brief run as one of Raven's lackeys before turning against him and beating Raven. Everything after this was good news for Kaz. He was entered into the Fight for the Right tournament, which was basically King of the Ring. This helped Kaz get some wins higher up the card. The tournament ended in a ladder match between him and Christian Cage. The match was excellent, some people might even put it in their top 10 TNA matches of all time. Christian did the classy thing here and put Kaz over in the match, which was the cherry on top of the ice cream. Kaz then went on to challenge for Kurt Angle's world title, and although he lost the match, he took Kurt Angle to his limits. Kaz continued to have good matches for the rest of the year. The way he was booked this year made him into a much bigger deal. It would have been higher on this list, but if it wasn't for the fact that his push didn't really mean a lot in the grand scheme of things. But it sure was fun to watch the matches at the time. Number 9. AJ Styles is wacky. Some people may not think that AJ Styles belongs on a list of good things from 2007. The show was not built around him at this point and he wasn't the world champion. But I found entertainment in the things he was doing that wasn't really his matches. Think of 2007 as AJ Styles trying to figure out his character, and it had hilarious consequences. He was mostly involved in a tug-of-war friendship between the Kurt Angle Alliance and the Christian Coalition. This tug-of-war seemed to leave him dizzy and confused as he acted like he'd taken a fist of crazy pills. One particular highlight was when he was trying to organise a Hawaiian-themed party and suggested to the other wrestlers that they should take their socks and shoes off and try to peel bananas with their feet. I almost couldn't believe the stuff he was saying. Is this really the same AJ Styles which has gone on to become one of the most respected wrestlers of this generation? And it was every week he was saying something dumb. That was just an example of millions. For a bunch of hilarious, wacky and entertaining promos, AJ Styles makes my list. Number 8, the birth of the Motor City Machine Guns. Both Shelley and Sabin were excellent, but fairly generic wrestlers in TNA prior to 2006, but that was all set to change. Similar to our last entry on our list, our two guys at entry number 8 spent a large part of 2007 developing their characters and their new team. The team's origins will be touched on a bit more in a later entry on the list, but I mean, I think this entry speaks for itself. 2007 was the year that Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley came together to form the Motor City Machine Guns, one of the cornerstones of the TNA tag division for years to come. They'd both been heels prior to coming together, but their natural charisma and exciting offense turned them into crowd favourites. They were originally managed by Kevin Nash due to the Detroit connection and Shelley and Nash's friendship, but unfortunately that didn't last long. Although they were now a tag team, they would still both regularly compete in the X division at the same time. The only negative that I can think of was that they were only ever 2-time tag team champions. It should have definitely been a lot more. They certainly gave me a reason to tune into TNA every week though back in the day. Number 7, Kevin Nash. Staying on the subject of Detroit, it might shock some of you to see Kevin Nash included on this list. Well, don't worry, the Hawk hasn't taken a brick to the head and lost the plot. He's not on here for his in-ring work. 2007 as a whole was an excellent year for comedy in TNA, and Nash was the lead stand-up in the group. He seemed to be all over the backstage segments, and you could tell he was just having a good time making them. He was just being the real Kevin Nash, and of course there was a lot of inside jokes about him not wanting to wrestle. Other than his main storyline, which I'm going to talk about later on, he played the character of a shoulder to cry on backstage. In fact, he was a bit more than that to a deranged Kurt Angle. He was his doctor. He would actually only wrestle 4 times in 2007, with all of those matches coming towards the end of the year. And none of that matters though, because 2007 would be nowhere near as entertaining without Kevin Nash's backstage comedy segments. Number 6, the rise of the beautiful people. Love them or hate them, 2007 is where this group began. A bit like the Motor City Machine Guns, however you might be wondering why I've ranked them higher. Well, simply because they were responsible for some of the highest rated TV segments in TNA of all time. So from that perspective, they have to be higher than the Guns. Plus, I mean, come on, Velvet Sky and Teenage Me went together like Bill and Ben the Flower Pot Men. There isn't too much to say specifically about the beautiful people in 2007 because they rocked up as Talia Madison and Angel Williams, and within weeks they'd just been shoved together. The rest is history. They were never famous for their match quality, but they represented the 3 letters of TNA perfectly. It wouldn't be TNA without them, would it? Number 5, Paparazzi Productions. This segment was so great I made an entire video about it. For some reason it never got the views of my other videos. Maybe it wasn't so great. I thought it was funny, maybe not. Anyway, Paparazzi Productions is basically a bunch of backstage skits involving Kevin Nash hanging out with the X Division wrestlers. He tries to help them to become bigger stars in wrestling by releasing their personalities. The whole thing actually started in 2006 with Nash ridiculing the X Division along with Alex Shelley, but by the time 2007 started, we got to witness the Paparazzi Productions. Nash now wanted to help the division. It was more excellent Kevin Nash comedy with the bullying of Senshi, calling Sanjay Dutt a roider, and trying to convince everyone that he, Kevin Nash, was indeed black. But this wasn't just Kevin Nash's comedy hour. The segment eventually led to Jay Lethal debuting the Black Machismo character, which was the highlight of his TNA run. The Paparazzi Productions was also of huge benefit to Alex Shelley, as he was Kevin Nash's right-hand man, and therefore got the second most amount of mic time. He got to show off the personality that nobody knew he had, and it set him up nicely for his Motor City Machine Guns run. Sanjay Dutt, Senshi, and Austin Starr, aka Austin Aries, did not gain anything positive from the experience. The first 2 due to, I believe, a lack of personality. You can't bring something out that isn't there. And Austin Starr, because the Austin Starr gimmick was stupid, so nobody cares about those guys. Number 4, Kurt Angle, champion. Kurt Angle in 2007 may be an acquired taste to some, but to those people, I say this, I'll hit you with a brick. Kurt was top of the company this year, but it wasn't as straightforward as that. I'll explain, but first we need to cover Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle. The two had been smashing the TV ratings for TNA in 2006 with their crazy feud and matches. But there was a playoff match between the two, and this was at Hard Justice 2007, in their 3rd matchup. All the gold was on the line here with Kurt Angle coming out on top. This wasn't quite as good as the other matches, but it was still really nice. Kurt was the heavyweight champion for almost the entirety of 2007. Now for the controversial bits. He spent most of the year crying, quite literally. His character was a deranged, depressed, belt-obsessed baldy who needed help from a psychiatrist, Dr. Nash. He was always crying and complaining to those around him, and they all had to tell him to get a grip. I thought it was hilarious, and I would never have changed the channel during Kurt Angle TNA promo. You never knew what he was going to say next. Only Kurt Angle can pull off this wacky comedy but still be taken seriously as a badass. Number 3, the start of the Knockouts division. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the division started. There were women in TNA prior to 2007, but there was no official division. It all started with Gail Kim coming over from the WWE. The division would not form straight away though, and she would just be AMW's manager. Apart from that, there was a delay for a bit before Awesome Kong, Roxy Laveau, ODB, Shelly Martinez and the beautiful people arrived in TNA. Nowadays, watching it back, it's nothing groundbreaking. Well, one exception. But at the time in 2007, the matches these women were having were far better than that of WWE women. The division was a mixture of wrestling experience, sex appeal and promo ability. But shout out to Gail Kim and Awesome Kong. This is really the feud that the division was founded upon, and this is what I'm talking about when I say it was the best women's wrestling around at the time. Gail Kim was the plucky underdog and Kong had been built up as a knockout killer. It just added to the amazing product of TNA in 2007. Number 2, a wild slapnuts disappears. Who's seen my video on the Jeff Jarrett Reign of Terror? Well, most of you by the look of it. Double J made the TNA main event scene a living hell for the first few years of the company's existence. It wasn't that he was bad, it was just his main event run was repetitive, never ending, annoying, predictable, and punch to the gut inducing. For years, everything revolved around Jeff Jarrett until Sting finally beat him for the title, and then Jeff Jarrett packed his bags and went home in storyline terms. The reason he was actually off TV is most likely a combination of things. First of all, he wanted to focus on his management role in TNA, and second is that his wife Jill sadly passed away in 2007. With Jeff gone from the main event scene, Kurt Angle was able to dominate, which was refreshing after the last few years. Trust me, Jarrett was literally all over the show for those years. I cannot understate it. He was also gone for the majority of 2008, which is also a really good year of TNA by coincidence. I honestly believe Jeff Jarrett is a good partner to have in a main event, but he is not the one to build a company around and should not be shoved down anyone's throat. Number 1, the year of the Cowboy. It's no secret round here that James Storm is one of my favourite wrestlers of all time, so as a fan of the Cowboy, 2007 is special to me. No world title runs for the Cowboy this year, but what we did see was a main eventer emerging from a tag team run. Storm had been in AMW for years with Chris Harris, and TNA management had always seen Chris Harris as the main eventer of the team. Storm eventually smashed Harris with a beer bottle, blinding him in one eye. Harris was then taken off TV in storyline terms, and Storm eventually switched from Gail Kim to Jacqueline, the Pride of Miss Tennessee, as his manager. Chris Harris then returned, and they proceeded to have my 2007 TNA match of the year. This is a vicious Texas death match. Definitely check this one out. Although Storm lost this one, it was going to be a case of completely different trajectories for their careers from here. Storm started a feud with Rhino, who was a recovering alcoholic. Storm thought it would be a good idea to tip beer over him, because that's what you do with someone who's an alcoholic. This started more amazing backstage segments and promos from the Cowboy. Whoever was directing these promos in 2007 was doing a great job. I mean, you had James Storm going to AA just to make fun of Rhino for having a drinking problem. It was great. It wasn't just the segments though, because they were also tearing it up in the ring. With Storm defeating Rhino, he disappeared off TV, so Storm went around bars trying to find Rhino. This was great, it was a recurring segment for a few weeks. Storm was continuously getting kicked out and the locals tried to fight him. This made you want to go on a bar crawl with Storm. It didn't even matter that Rhino beat Storm in the following match, because Storm had already demolished him with all these segments. Then there was that time that he had his own title belt, the Beer Drinking Championship. It was basically just a John Cena spinner belt with beer bottles glued to it. He feuded with Eric Young over it in beer drinking competitions. And again, yes, this was excellent TV. It certainly beat whatever you had planned on Friday night. Some of this stuff does spill over into 2008, but don't hate. The Rhino Storm feud ended at the start of 2008 in an Elevation X match, which is a scaffold match. Storm hid inside the structure and drank his beer whilst Rhino charged around looking like a moron. There's nothing less appealing than when someone looks like they're taking something too seriously. Just like me on a Monday night, I just smash my head into the wall until either an idea hits me and I knock it out of the park, or I straight up just get knocked out. So that's it, TNA 2007 in a bubble. Lots of comedy and excellent backstage stuff, but there was also some great wrestling in there, and that's how it's best. Guess who was on the booking team in 2007? Vince Russo. Well, that explains it all then, doesn't it? We had some massive misses in 2007, like the electric steel cage and the reverse battle royal. But then we had some excellent character development and entertainment. Who'd have hawked it? Let me know down below what your favourite year of wrestling was and for which company. It feels good to talk about something positive for a change, so let's all end this on a positive note. Make sure you subscribe or I'll choke you round the throat.